Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to a new episode of the Partido podcast, where we talk everything Atleti. And if you're joining on this show, this is the second episode of the season, where we are to talk about Atleti's defeat against Espanyol, and also talking about what that defeat highlights, what Atleti needs, and also talk about the positive from the game. And we also talk about the preview of the Elche game. I'm joined by my very, very good friend, Kelvin Brown, to actually talk about all this. So, Kelv, how are you doing, and how did you enjoy the episode?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it was another really good episode. We got into a lot of detail of what happened against Espanyol, and hopefully gave the listeners a bit of a picture of what is likely to happen on Saturday against Elche. We'll only know once the game starts on Saturday. But
Yeah, exactly. Today, and Kelv, this episode was actually nice, but I actually have a cold, so I hope the listeners will actually have to bear with me, dragging my nose and the frequent coughs, because actually like the rainy season here in Cameroon, and when it's rainy, it's cold, and you have to actually have your pullovers at all time. In Africa, yeah, I think especially Cameroon, we have just the dry and the rainy season, and we're in the month of August, and in Cameroon, especially when you are in the northwest or west region of the country, it's rainy almost all day in those months. And before we actually came on like record, we actually talked about this. And Kelv, is it kind of like similar in where you are in England?
similar in what way?
Similar in like the rainy season where you have like a lot of rain non-stop. I know you are based in Brighton at the moment, and do you have the similarities of like when it's the rainy season, the cold goes up another level? I know you have winter, which I believe is maybe the coldest.
Yeah, we probably don't have it in a particular time of the year. In Brighton, in England, it can happen really at any sort of moment. The moment we are now or the moment we have been particularly for the last few months, is definitely the warmest part of the year here. The colder times will be around October, November, December, January in particular. They're probably our coldest months, and then it starts to change a little bit after January. But yeah, I wouldn't say, because even in the warmer days over here, there's then suddenly we might get rain for a few hours or rain for a day or something like that. So it's, even though it does rain more and it is cold here at certain points of the year, it can also be very unpredictable. I have noticed it's been a bit more humid this year. So it's been warm, but it's not necessarily been sunny, kind of the weather that we've had here today. So, but I can't complain. I grew up in Brighton, in England, and I've lived here all my life. So I'm very fortunate to be here.
Being a Cameroonian is actually another fortunate thing, because Cameroon is like Africa in miniature, where it's like we are the epicenter of the whole of Africa, and it's like everything which is found in Africa can be found in Cameroon, and it's like it's called Africa in miniature. And you have the French speaking side where they refer to it as Le Continent. That means they are saying that given that Cameroon has almost everything, or a bit of everything you can find in Africa, then Cameroon is a continent on itself. And I think the AFCON comes in December in Morocco, where you have these vibes. I think things like this will come up again, and everything. So Kelv, back to the episode. Excuse me. What was your favorite bit of the episode? Because I really, really enjoyed when you gave like a tactical breakdown of like what Espanyol did, and what we are to expect from Elche, and also what Atleti could improve in this season.
Yeah, I mean, just to say how the game went and what Espanyol did, which wasn't too far from what we thought they would do. Particularly, me and you, we both watch quite a bit of La Liga. So, because with Elche, it's a little bit more difficult, because I think you clearly saw Elche more last year, and I believe Elche played against you last year in the Copa del Rey, so which I didn't get to see, but I was helped by the fact that I have seen clips of Eder Sarabia's teams, and the fact that he was Setien's number 2 at Las Palmas, at Betis, and at Barcelona clearly helped, because even though we said about the differences, that there's also similarities. So anything in Spanish football that's kind of similar helps, because then I already have a little bit of an idea of what to expect. But I also like whenever it's the newly promoted teams, whether it's Oviedo, Elche, Levante. So far, I've seen Oviedo and Elche. I've not seen Levante play yet. I'll probably see them play this weekend. So to get an idea of Levante and what they might be able to do this year, because I know they lost at Alaves, but I've not seen that game. So, but hopefully the bottom 3 in La Liga will be competitive, because it hasn't been the case for the last couple of years. And I think just watching the whole league, it just opens your perspective, not just on football, but on many other things as well.
Yeah, Kerl fan. From my point of view, La Liga is basically the best league in the world to watch. And despite some of the challenges in terms of like it maybe increasing its amount of viewership, and also no La Liga TV this season, which make watching live matches kind of boring, because no halftime analysis or pre-game analysis. But despite the fact, I believe it's really a good league. And you talk about the newly promoted teams, and I think there are 3 teams who actually have contrasting styles of how they want to play. And I think that's what makes La Liga fun, because despite the fact that you have the big boys, everybody has his own style how he or she wants to play. And I believe it's a league where technicality shines. And if you are not technically astute enough, you struggle a bit, except that your team can create a context for you to shine, like we discussed about Cholo trying to find a context for Gallagher. And I just hope we have relegation battle this time around and not have more teams like Oviedo, Real Valladolid of last season. And I think the highlight from this weekend on Matchday 1 was actually seeing Sørloth watch his lovely
Yes.
Real Oviedo actually. And I'm sure he must be gutted by when Solomon Rondon actually missed the penalty, and he was like, we are back after it, and we have the opportunity to actually get on the score sheet. And that actually went downhill for them, with Villarreal winning comfortably and Oviedo being one of the teams who had it's actually really a fun league and a lot of stories to tell as well. And Atleti are playing Elche this weekend, and Atleti has a connection with Elche, with Saul, who just left this summer, and that's one of the clubs where he went on loan to.
Oh, yes.
And also a club where he is actually close to. What stood out for you this weekend? Because what stood out for me was Bordalas using players from Spanish third and fourth tier, using right and left backs, and putting up a defensive masterclass against one of the best ball possession teams in the league.
That was definitely, particularly tactically. If you struggle in terms of, if you're a coach or something and you want to kind of see how to set up a team defensively to be well organised, as you said, against one of the best possession teams in the league, to be organised, to carry a threat, because I think that's the thing that sometimes is forgotten when teams defend deep. You still have to carry a threat, an attacking threat in transition, and I think they did that superbly against Celta, with the hat for the fact that Celta were poor defensively. But Getafe still had to take advantage of that. And you mentioned before, for the fact that Bordalas was at Elche, I forgot that he was at Elche, and I think he nearly got them to promotion to the Liga a couple of times. Then went to Getafe and took them straight up. So I think Bordalas has, he's done at Getafe what he needed to do, and for the way that he plays. And I totally agree with your point about the Liga, incredible league, different styles, lots of story to tell. I was fortunate enough growing up in the UK to see the coverage, not just from La Liga TV in recent years, before that when I was younger with Revista de la Liga. I just learned so much. And bearing in mind, I'm born in England, and of course in my country we have the Premier League, but I've generally always enjoyed La Liga more. I think the way I see the game is more suited La Liga than it is to the Premier League. I'm not going to get into an argument or a debate on which one's better, because depending on who you ask, you could be there till the end of time. But I've really enjoyed La Liga since I was young, and watching so many different teams, different styles, different ideas. Particularly from a coaching standpoint, you think of the coaches that La Liga have had in it, and that Spanish football in general has produced. Not just being successful in Spain, but a number of them are doing well in the Premier League, and what Xabi Alonso has done in Germany. But of course, he's now back in Spain. So I think there's just, as you said, there's so many different stories to tell, different cultures depending on where in Spain certain teams are. The south and the north in particular. So yeah, I think we're fortunate enough, as you said. Unfortunately, certain things with the Liga TV aren't quite there at the moment. Hopefully, that will change in the future. But it's definitely, in my opinion, the best league, and I've been fortunate to see the best coverage.
Yeah, Kelv, actually started watching a lot of La Liga recently, before, I think, from about 2009 to 2015. Yeah, I watched a lot of Atleti and not La Liga, but I think from then on, made a lot of good accounts on Twitter who actually made me like La Liga Gaff watch a lot of La Liga as well. So, Kelv,
Mhm.
what is one thing you would tell an Atleti fan to maybe follow La Liga more closely?
I think you mentioned it about not just the contrast in styles from the newly promoted teams, but I think you get that across the league. You get that different teams, different styles. The transfer window still open, so there may still be new players coming in over the next couple of weeks, and players going and departing. But I generally think the La Liga this year is going to be very, very good, and hopefully more competitive across the whole division. I think last year the top was really competitive. I think in the middle over the last 5-6 years, that kind of like 8th to like 16th. I think it's probably been the most competitive it has been anywhere. So I think that's always a positive, and the more teams down the bottom that on occasion can take points off the top sides, the more interesting league you have anywhere. And I think that there's genuine a chance, especially as Atleti have already proven away from home. That I'm sure there'll be occasions this year where Barca and Madrid and Atleti and others will struggle at certain places, not just Espanyol, but places like Getafe, possibly Alaves, but I'm not too sure about them yet. Maybe Oviedo. We've not seen Oviedo at home yet and what they're going to be like. So yeah, there's lots of interesting points and potential things that could happen.
Of interesting things that could happen within this season, and we hope that a lot of Atleti fans can actually check that out, and I'm sure their main focus will be on tonight. I think the episode will be out tomorrow, so that's like the day before, where they will be focusing on Atleti presenting their new signings and all. So I think we head on now to talk about the game against Espanyol. The La Liga season is well and on the way, and Atleti lost the first game against Espanyol at the RCZ Stadium by 2-1. Atleti were leading from a free kick goal for Muli, and that's his third free kick as an Atleti player, and that shows you the type of player he is. And in the second half, Atleti kind of fell apart thanks to some of the changes El Cholo made, and Espanyol were able to like get their way back into the game from using their strengths, which are set pieces and crossing to the box, given they have a lot of players who are good aerially, both in attack and in defense. So, Kelf, kicking off things, Kelf, talking about this scoreline, because coming to the season, and a lot of Atleti fans have the buzz with the signings they have made, with the promise of like a new approach to the game, more high pressing, more control of the ball, more passing fluidity, like a glimpse of what Atleti fans saw in the preseason game against Newcastle, and a lot of buzz in this game. And coming to the season, Atleti fans were high, and I'm sure a lot of Atleti fans were like, this is not an easy game because Atleti has not beaten Espanyol. in the last. Atleti has beaten Espanyol, sorry, just once in the last 5 meetings, and you have this boss that Atleti they should have a lot of new signings, a lot of young ones, under 23 players, and they have to adapt. But how do you think this scoreline affects Atleti's view of the season? Because Cholo talked about the fact that he is aware of the fact that his changes actually were not the best, and they kind of affected the game in a negative way, and it's a learning curve. But then again, if you look at like previous seasons, Atleti has had to rely on maybe bench players. You have this inconsistency in throughout the games, which we have seen from last season, like especially the second half of last season. So how do you think this game affects Atleti's fans' view of the season? Because after the game, you had a lot of negative chatter, especially coming from well-renowned journalists on Atleti spending a lot of money, and they still have Diego Simeone as the coach.
When you make a start on the opening day and you've lost, there's going to be a negative reaction. That's just what happens, particularly nowadays in football. I think in terms of the different style you mentioned, I think I would say for about 60, 65 minutes, I think we saw that. We definitely saw not so much in the pressing and the high pressing, but as we said in the last pod we did, previewing the season and previewing the Espanyol game, that Espanyol are quite direct as a team, and it's not easy to press a team high that continually, or most of the time will either kick the ball long or will kick it into midfield. And when you've got strikers like Espanyol have with Roberto, and especially in the second half when they played Roberto Fernandez and Kike up front, and they went more direct, it's tougher to get those high pressing moments to work because there's less opportunities to do it. But I think, as I said, for 60 minutes, I think on the ball, I thought Atleti were very good, very patient, didn't rush anything. We saw a lot of those, as you said, those combinations and those, difficult passes and trying to, Almeida was moving well, Baena was finding space, and you were finding them. Of course, even though you're against a very good Espanyol team who are very good defensively, I'm sure that there could have been one or two better quality of chances created. And I do agree with Cholo that his changes did have a negative impact on the game. I'm sure we'll go into them in more detail. But I think, as I said, for 60 minutes, we did see some of what you mentioned, not all of it, but I think we saw a bit more of a clearer idea on a different kind of way of playing for Atleti. As you said, you've relied on subs and relied on, I think, being more direct, getting the ball into the box quicker as well. And with the players you've got, you probably have. I mean, when you got Alvarez up front, for example, as you guys did, you can't just go long with the ball in the air to him because he's not going to win it. So you have to find ways of, as I said, being more patient and playing for Espanyol. And you did that in the first half. You did it on one brilliant occasion in the second half.
Yeah, Kulf, like you said, we saw what Cholo has been selling to the fans during the preseason, even though it was not actually long. And after the substitutions, I think that was the turning point of the game, the Cholo substitutions. And it actually changed a lot. And like you said, and like he said, that's not actually great. And it's a learning curve. And it actually like brought a lot of negativity chatter online, which you have like a lot of questioning Atleti signings. And you even have guys actually questioning if Atleti should have taken the money and bought one or two players. And I know we don't actually plan to talk on this, but that part actually like got me really pissed because it shows even guys who have followed La Liga for a long time still actually don't quite really understand the duopoly in Spain and how things actually go. This is no excuse for Atleti losing the game against Espanyol. That's not what I'm saying here. But I'm sure you agree with me that Atleti has actually widened the gap on the other 17 teams in La Liga, which is very evident, and they have kind of cemented their place as the third best team in La Liga. But Atleti are still far off from the top two in terms of financial resources and also in terms of the quality they can have. Because I believe in the modern football at the moment, the resources that you have actually kind of determine the quality you have. I know we have some teams where they have a lot of financial resources and they are not making good use of it, but it kind of determine. And it's actually surprising that you have some who suggest that Atleti should have taken the money where they bought 7 to 8 players to actually like buy just maybe 2 or 3 players like Julian Alvarez. And it actually begs the question where I think last season or season before last on the podcast where we had a lot of talk and we were talking about the fact that all the attack is in the all the talent in the team is like in the attack. And how do you do that? Because these Atleti teams actually need a lot of like rejuvenation in a lot of areas on the pitch. Their attack is actually okay, but the Atleti doesn't have, apart from Julian Alvarez, Atleti don't have somebody who can guarantee you, 30 goals a season. Sørloth tried that last season. And if you look at Atleti's squad and you ask yourself the question, how many of these players can actually like start for Football Club and Barcelona? And maybe aside Julian Alvarez, you don't have many. And it's not because Atleti have done poor recruitment. It is because they have actually recruited to what their finances allowed them to. It's true they could have done better, like with the centre back situation we are going to talk about. And I just wanted to make like clear the air because it's actually frustrating when you have a lot of big accounts on Twitter or now X tweet out a lot of things without taking a lot of context into perspective. It really, really, really hurting. It's like, for example, saying a club like Villarreal who are actually on an upward trajectory after actually like achieve like a fourth best team in La Liga for like let's say 3 to 4 seasons, and then you start expecting them to be challenging for the league. And you and I know that to challenge for the league means you need to go against Football Club Barcelona and Real Madrid. And we know the financial powerhouse that they have. And all what I've just said is just to like say before you want to actually ask something of Atleti, I think you should take into context. And that's not me excusing the fact that Atleti should not compete. I think the Cholo himself has acknowledged that, and the board knows that competing for every trophy is what we are for. But winning those trophies is not actually obligatory given where we are. And I know a lot of people want Atleti to take the risks by like investing heavily, but I'm sure we have seen that how that turned out in Spain with the likes of Valencia and Malaga. So, Curve, taking all what I've said into consideration, I'm sorry I was just venting out. What's your opinion on that topic?
No, that's excuse me. That's fine. No, I think you made a lot of valid points. I think the one thing we've all got to do is recognise, and I will admit I'm not Cholo's biggest fan, but I will say the one thing that he deserves more credit for than anything else is getting you guys to be the third best team in Spain, because you were nowhere near that when he got the job. I know it was a very long time ago now, 2011. But what he did, and particularly what he did very quickly, first full season, he won the Copa del Rey against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. He then won La Liga the following year, Champions League final in Lisbon, and then lost players, but then built kind of another team that got to another Champions League final in Milan, and then. But as you said, yeah, financially it's very difficult to compete with excuse me, with Real Madrid and with Barcelona. It's probably easier at the moment with Barcelona because of where Barcelona are in their own financial situations. I do think in the world of football, there's too much is looked into, money spent and that sort of thing. Just because you have the biggest budget in the world doesn't mean you have the best team. Um, I know lots of fans and journalists talk, especially in England, about this team have bought the league. Well, just as an English thing, Manchester United have had one of the biggest spends of anyone in Europe in the last however many years, and they nearly got relegated from the Premier League last year. So just spending money isn't a guarantee of success. I do agree with the players that you have signed over the last few years that you do have to, as you said, it's not an obligation to win trophies, but you got to compete. And for a few years, you didn't compete in the Copa del Rey at all. You'd get to the early rounds and then lose in first, second round, or whenever it was. Whereas last year, you got to the semi-final. So that was a far bigger jump in terms of actually competing. You competed, I would say, for 75% of the league last year, which was better than what you'd done the year before. So if you analyse it in that way, there is an improvement in terms of being more competitive. But yeah, I think people are going to look into things. They'll just see the players that are bought. I mean, I totally agree with you that it's better to reinvest in the whole team when it's needed, rather than just going out and spending really big on 2 or 3 players, because I think you needed it. I think we can all agree that rejuvenation should have happened earlier, but it didn't, and that happens in football on occasion, because sometimes it's not very easy to predict when changes in the squad have to happen, and when big changes have to happen as well, because telling a player who's played week in, week out they're not going to play much is not an easy thing. I'm sure it wasn't an easy conversation that Sørloth had this summer with Griezmann and with Koke, because I'm sure that they would have been told that, with the new players coming in and the way that the idea, whether the execution will be the same, but the idea of going in a different direction means that you have to make those changes. But they're definitely, when I was growing up, it was only the big 2 in Spain. That's not the case anymore. It's a big 3, and that's the fantastic thing that Sørloth has done in his time at Atletico, that we all believe that you can compete for La Liga. Some people believe you'll win it. And that is, when we look back in however many years, whenever he does decide to no longer be the Atleti manager, that is his main legacy. Of course, he's won La Liga twice, and he's won the Cup, and he's won 2 Europa Leagues. But his greatest thing is where he's taken Atletico Madrid from where they were to where they are now, including, of course, the transition from the Calderon to the Metropolitano as well. On top of that has to be factored in as well.
I agree with everything, and his legacy for sure is undeniable, and hopefully, because I think Atleti fans as well, he evolves with the game, because like we were talking before we came to the pod, the game has actually evolved. And actually, going back to the game, Espanyol played in a 4-4-2 and Atleti played in a 4-2-3-1, where you had Gallagher and Johnny as the pivots. And even though a lot of things actually transpired when Atleti were playing, and what do you think actually like caught your attention with how Atleti actually used the ball? Because I think the roles Gallagher had was actually great, because he played to his strengths, and I think Cholo actually maximized the ability of every player that was on the pitch for that starting 11.
Well, as I said earlier, you were more patient, because I think at times, particularly depending on things, I think Atleti have sometimes, to me, it sounds like maybe been in a rush and have played direct at times, even though if you've had like Julian up front, as we said before, you can't really play long balls to him, because it's going to be difficult for him to compete in the air. But so yeah, I would say that you guys were more patient, waiting for gaps to appear in midfield. I agree in the way that Conor Gallagher was used. He had a half chance where he made a very good run from deep, and we spoke about this before. I can't remember exactly who played the ball for him. It might have been Hanchko, it might have been someone else, but someone played the ball over the top for him. He made a really good run. I think was caught because he was on his own, whether to try and pass to someone or shoot. I'm pretty sure from my memory, his attempt was blocked. But I think, the more that you can get Gallagher doing that, the better for him. I agree that, everyone was pretty much in their preferred positions. I don't know if Almeida prefers to play on the left or plays as a number 10. As I said before, I haven't seen too much of him. And I think, but certainly Gallagher prefers to be a central midfielder. You had, as you said, Johnny, who I thought had a good first half, and he's again good on the ball. The other thing I noticed at Atleti, if they were bypassing the midfield, it was mainly a switch of play to the fullbacks, mainly from either Ruggieri or Hanchko to Llorente. Llorente had a lot of space. I don't think Javi Puado tracked him that much, but then Llorente wasn't just getting the ball head down and running or just putting it in the box. He was looking, what's the best pass? It could be to Lenormand, it could be back into Gallagher, it could be a pass down the line for Giuliano, because I think the partnership that was developed last year between Llorente and Giuliano works very well down the right side. So I saw more patience, I saw more quality, I saw better movement, especially coming towards the ball. Maybe not in, even though I mentioned Gallagher, maybe not enough people going beyond at times, even though Espanyol at times were defending deep and the space is limited. I still think it's important to make those runs just so that the Espanyol defence have something else to think about. I know that we spoke before about, you said that Atleti were causing Espanyol problems when Julian would drop, and sometimes he and Baena would drop, and the centre backs would be taught whether do we press, do we drop off. But I think if you don't have people running, and we can talk about maybe players running at defences as well, but if you don't have people running beyond even deep defences, it's sometimes not easy to play through them. You need that at the right time. Everything has to be done at the right time, but you need that, as I said, that Gallagher run or a Julian or an Almeida. Giuliano, I think, can do it very, very well, particularly if Llorente is keeping the width of just making the Espanyol or any defence think that, hang on, we've got our shape here, but do we press? Do we drop off? I think that's something that can be improved. But as you said before, there was lots of new signings, 2 in defence, 1 in midfield, and 2 in the 3 behind the striker. So and a lot of those questions, a lot of that will be solved as the season goes on, as partnerships and relationships are built, especially in the point you were referring between Gallagher and Johnny Cardoso.
When it comes to runners, then Atleti actually are not short of runners, because Julian himself, despite the fact that he dropped, he's also a runner. And I think before the season started, you had like Ruben Uria, who is like a popular journalist when it comes to inside Atleti related news, and he talked about the fact that Gallagher will have a crucial role. And myself, I was kind of like conflicted, because I was like, which type of role? I don't really see the role that Gallagher can have in this team, because in possession he struggles a bit, and his main qualities are basically him attacking space. And given that Atleti has a lot of like ball to fit players in the likes of Baena, Amada, and maybe also including Alvarez, and then that's where Gallagher comes in, and maybe that's why Sørloth was pissed about him having a secondary role, because if Atleti can actually have somebody who can actually attack space when Julian drops, then maybe he's not out order needed. And like you said, we had more patient build up because of Amada. And last podcast, on the last episode, so on the previous episode, I mentioned we actually needed a midfielder who can actually help with progressive play, not just by covering which barriers does, but by actually progressing the play with passes. And Amada actually provided that, because he dropped deep and allowed the left flank for Ruggieri. Wow, that name. And you had now Baena dropping in the pockets. And what was actually impressive in the game for me is that Atleti played a team who defended in a low block, and Atleti did not have a lot of problems like creating opportunities or getting to the final 10. And I think that's a positive for me, given what we have seen. And I'm saying so because when I say this curve, the 2018 season where we had Roger and won the Europa League is in mind. When we were given the ball to actually be the protagonist, we struggled a lot. And it's like the game went flat and you had a lot of nil-nil draws or a scrappy 1-0 win where that's the only chance we created. So it was actually hellish. And to actually see that with the likes of Baena, Amara creating and detecting play was actually very, very nice for us. And I think the roles of each player in that first half, especially with the first 60 minutes, was actually crucial because despite what these players offer on the ball, they actually are willing to run, like high press. And it's true, Atleti do not high press a lot in that game, but I think you saw the intent of what Koke said in the game, after the Porto game, and also reflecting what Atleti may offer this season. And it's actually very interesting what the Rua Maida have, because if you look at the average positioning play of like the players, you find him next to Johnny, where Espanyol actually started the game and Espanyol caused a lot of problems for Atleti because they high pressed in the first 5 minutes. And one of the issues for that was because, when many teams high press, they actually want to force you to go wide so that they can use the touchline as an extra defender. Espanyol actually did that, and it was working because Atleti don't have the quality in their fullbacks to actually help them escape that pressure. I think that's one of the reasons why Cholo likes Galan, because his ball carrying ability actually helps in those moments where the opponent have actually forced you wide and using the touchline against you. And when Amarana drops now, he now created a central overload where Atleti could have more passing options. And that when Atleti use Amara to progress the play 1 or 2 times, you now had the Espanyol block dropping deeper and deeper. And what was impressive again is that the distribution of Hansko, and he kind of provided what Hermoso used to do, where Hermoso's distribution, especially given that in this game Atleti were focused more on the left with the intricate passing between the lines of Amara, Alvarez, and Baena, and their movements also caused a lot of problems for Espanyol, and the space opening out on the wings for Ruggeri to attack. And in those moments where they actually pulled the Espanyol defense towards the left, you had now the right side with Giuliano and Lorente willing to make those overlapping runs, and then a switch of play, which you mentioned, was brought into play. So it's like Atleti had a lot of ways to actually break down this Espanyol team, which in my opinion was very, very positive. And I think I'll stay with those positive despite the negative, which were the negative are actually what changed the game for Atleti. And the moments where you talk about Gallagher, which I believe this would be the role if he plays in midfield, would be the moments where Atleti play, like for example, in the moments where Espanyol choose to go man on man, like man mark Atleti, you have Julian dropping in, and then you have a wall pass from Julian to Cardozo, and Cardozo actually trying to pick out the run of Gallagher. I think he had 3 of such runs, and one was successful, and where the one you mentioned where he couldn't actually go for shot or play pass because it was kind of alone, and then his first touch had taken me a lot wide. So I believe there are a lot of positive in that game if you look at it, and I think maybe it gives us a glimpse of what Cholo has in store for us this season. So let's go to the changing moment of the game. That's the substitution. Wow. What's your opinion on that? And does that tell us about the drop in quality in Atleti's bench? When I say quality, I'm talking about what is expected of Atleti to play this season, like the high pressing, the intensity, the rotation, controlling play.
Mm-hmm.
Because to those who don't know, Cardozo was taken off because he was on a yellow, and given that La Liga referees were very happy, both in Spanish referees, were very happy both in the Primera and the Segunda to kind of like dishing out cards. Cholo did not want to actually risk Cardozo taking a red card, and he brought on Koke, which continued the trend, but then Atleti lose the game. This substitution, what does it tell Atleti fans about what the options Atleti have on the bench?
I think you have good options from the bench. I think but the most important thing is timing. You mentioned the point about Cardoso having to come off because he's on a yellow, and you make the point about But as far as I could see, and unless you will correct me when you next speak and said that he had an injury, there was no need to take Gallagher off.
For sure.
None, as far as I can see, unless he had an injury, which I don't believe he did. So he could have gone, right, Johnny's on a yellow card, as you mentioned. We don't want him to get sent off. We don't want to go down to 10. So then just go, right, Johnny for Barrios. In my opinion, nothing changes that much. I don't think there's that much difference in in Johnny and Barrios. I think Barrios is a better ball carrier and is better at driving into space when there is there than Johnny, but I think Johnny can do that quite well as well. I don't think there was need to make two at half time. I think one would have been fine. I think I think Sørloth tried to slow the game down, which if you're 2-0 up is okay, but at 1-0 up, in my opinion anyway, you've still got to have the thing of the mentality of no, we need to even if you don't get the second goal, you need to try, because we all knew Espanyol were going to react. We mentioned it on the previous podcast. They are very, very good at home, and their record against the top teams last year. I mean, you lost there last year, and Real Madrid lost there last year, and okay, Barcelona won, but Espanyol made it difficult for Barcelona. It wasn't like Barcelona had one of their mega wins and found it very, very easy. They didn't. No one finds it easy at the moment to go to Espanyol and play them. So I don't think it's an issue in terms of the quality. I think it's more just for the fact that you could argue whether they were the right or the wrong changes. Of course, in hindsight, we're going to say they're wrong. I would look at more for the fact that it was the wrong timing, and it was that there's no need. You cannot go into 45 minutes away at Espanyol, only 1-0 up. And as you said, okay, you guys got to the final third, much better in terms of but there wasn't that many. There wasn't a real quality chance like we saw in the second half, and that was the only really one in the entire half from Atleti in that second half. So I think you have to have the mentality of that, and I think Sørloth, this is his natural instinct. I think he's so used to in the team here back in the day. We get one goal, that's fine. We're not going to concede. I don't think you can think like that anymore. I think the mentality, even if you don't get it, the mentality has to be that we have to push forward. We have to search, try and get the second. We know Espanyol are going to attack us. They're going to open up more. That's going to leave us space if we do the right things. And that's the other thing that Atleti have to improve on. So I would say it was more to do with the timing of not just those changes, but especially the changes of Baena and Almeida. Again, I didn't see any tiredness. Okay, we found that Baena did get injured, but I don't know whether if that was at the Espanyol game. I couldn't physically see any indication of why he needed to do it. Now, whether it's because he had a big squad last year, and I'm sure we're going to come on to this later on, if he's trying to keep people happy, because last year we spoke after the Betis game when you guys lost at Betis for the fact that he kind of decided that this is my 11, and he convinced the people that were on the bench that you will play half an hour and you will have this impact from the bench. And whether he's trying to find a way of doing that again, I don't know. Only Sørloth can answer that. But I think when you're taking off Cardoso and Gallagher and you're bringing on players like Barrios and Coque, they're good players. They're very good footballers. You take off Baena for Griezmann, okay, and then Almeida for Raspadori. Raspadori is a good player. You don't do what he's done and play for a club like Napoli that have just won the Scudetto if you're a bad footballer. So if I was talking to Sørloth or us now, I'd just say it was more to do with the timing of those substitutions rather than the subs themselves. If they were completely tired and they were struggling to run, then I could say, okay, get energy onto the pitch, because I think that's the right thing to do. But I just don't think I just couldn't see any need, unless they were injured. There was no need to make the changes at half time, and there was no need to make the two changes with around about half an hour to go.
The subs actually came in the 76th minute. That's actually, you'll be like, yeah, but like you said, yeah, 76th. Oh, putain, 67th minute, sorry.
Oh, 67th. Oh, okay.
You know, a lot of managers actually bring on players after the 60-minute mark, and I think what we agree on is that he took off players who were actually making the team click. And it's true, he went for more control with Koke on at halftime, and taking off Amada and Baena at the same time. I think, like you said, it was actually risky, because Now, when Amara was not there and Espanyol are 2-1 up and they are playing in a low block now, you don't have that player who can actually cause an unbalance because at least you don't have a dribbler, like somebody who can take on players and actually create something out of like nothing. And that was actually the problem because you have taken off two of your most creative players, and watching this version of Griezmann is actually very painful because it actually screams or echoes like, yeah, he's an Atleti legend, and but it looks like you can actually see why he comes off the bench, and it's like he looks like a player who is way beyond his time in the elite football. But we still know his quality because if you see the goal against Newcastle, not many players in the world of football can do that. But then again, like you said, I believe it's about trying to keep everyone happy because Atleti have big names on the bench, and like you said, it was not easy convincing the likes of Koke and Griezmann that they will have a secondary role this season, but they will want to have minutes. And it's actually like tough to tell because if the changes work, we are calling him, for example, a genius now, and since it does not work, but I'm sure he himself agrees with us that the changes did not work and the changes were not the right ones because he admitted that after the game, not just because he lost, but because he saw the impact, the negative impact those changes made. It's like the changes gave Espanyol more momentum, and he did not actually adapt to the change Espanyol made at halftime by going by two up top. And like you said, Espanyol, they are not really a ball dominant team, and they have a lot of area duel winners in the game. And you have the likes of Fernando Calero at the back, and in attack, you have Kike Garcia, who came on and was a menace for us. And if you look at their team, like the area duels won between the game, and checking on stats from every ref, you see actually that Lenormand won 4 out of 6 area duels, but apart from that, the rest are from like Espanyol players where they actually like did so well. And you have the likes of Roberto Fernandez, who is like the striker, and he was causing a lot of problems. So it's like the changes did not actually like work in Alice's favor, and did not actually like hurt Espanyol's momentum because they were getting momentum. They are playing at home, their home fans are behind them, going one goal up, obviously. And the second goal was just stupid because they pass this unnecessary switch of play from Barrios or whatever. But I believe the key point here is like the changes were not the right one, and they did not actually do Aleti a lot of justice. So, Kelv, a quick question. Who do you think should be Aleti's starting midfield like throughout the season? Because obviously, depending on the game, you want to rotate. Also, Sørloth, he wasn't happy Raspadori came on before him, and he's now like the fourth choice at the moment.
Well, first of all, can I understand Sørloth's anger at being brought on as late? Yes. He was your top goal scorer last year with Julian. I've said quite strongly that he deserved more starts than he got last year. I understand that Sørloth has an idea in terms of the pressing, that sort of thing. But I think when you've got a number 9 that's scoring the goals that he is, you've got to at least try to find some ways of starting them, because as I said before, it can add a different dimension in attack, which I think can only help. In terms of the midfield too, it's difficult because I think we know Koke won't start that often. So I think it's 2 out of the other 3, and they're all fantastic footballers, but they're similar as well. I would put Gallagher in because, as I've said to you before, I think he worked. I know, as you said, his quality's not on the ball. We know that, but I think his energy to win it back, his pressing, for the fact that most teams, you said about when they press man for man, a lot of teams now, because the majority play the 4-2-3-1 shape, one of their midfielders has to go and press higher, and the other one stays back. Gallagher can easily get up and down and do that for the vast majority of the game. He can do that easily. Now, we know that Atleti see Barrios as a very important player. I personally would have Cardoso next to Gallagher because I think the partnership looked relatively good against Espanyol. Wasn't perfect, but I think it's something that can be built on. I think Cardoso is maybe slightly better on the ball than Barrios, even though Barrios is maybe a better ball carrier, even though I don't think there's much in it between them. But but as you said, it depends on the opposition, and I think particularly with players like Gallagher, Barrios, and Cardoso, it will just be determined also by their fitness and by their sharpness. You know, if they're not, if Cholo looks at them in training and he just thinks, no, you need one of you need this game. Maybe Gallagher, maybe no, Gallagher need this game out. But I think Barrios can do elements of what Gallagher does. I think Cardoso, we've seen him do elements of it at not as much, but you know, he did get up and down at times at Betis. So again, we'll have to see what part. I think Cholo has to decide a partnership, and I think he has to give it a run of games, just as we're talking about Lenormand and Hansko. I think he does decide. My guess is it will be Cardoso and Barrios when Barrios is fully fit. That's what I'm predicting. But it will depend on the various factors I've mentioned.
I agree with you on that because I can recall there are moments when we have come to the podcast and we have talked about Simeone not knowing his best starting 11, and we don't need that. And we need him to actually have like a laid on double pivot because we need those guys protecting the defense and also forming the partnership. And I think getting to the season with everyone, I think, was like it's Barrios and Cardozo. Given everyone has agreed that Koke will have like a secondary role and Gallagher is like he's not fit in given last season, but he showed on match day one that he's willing to fight for a place, and especially given that this is a World Cup season and he wants to get that call up and be on the flight to those who are going to the US of A. So yeah. And talking about Sørloth, I think that's very true. And I actually posted his statistics today, like actually carrying out a census on Atleti's fans' opinion on him. And the stats are actually very, very good because if you actually look at them and you have him being, for example, 24 goals in 57 games, and in those 57 games, he came off the bench 35 times. And he had 14 goals as a substitute, more than any other player in Europe top 5 league. He scored a goal every 78 minutes in La Liga, the best rate across Europe. So taking these stats into consideration, I'm sure in his mind, he will be like, if I have those stats coming off the bench, then I believe I deserve more stats this season. And even if I don't have more stats this season, then at least I should be your first go-to signing the attack. I think you agree with me on this. And not Raspadori, who just came in. So it's actually maybe I can get his frustration, but with Baena's injury, and according to reports, Baena will be out up to the international break, which will be, I think, the 1st of September. So he will be surely back after the break. So hopefully he's back by Matchday 4. So I think that gives Sørloth a run of games in the team, and let's see how he goes. I mean, we're talking about the guy who scored a hat-trick in 24 minutes. So under 24 minutes. So yeah. Kelv, moving on. We have to talk about the defensive concerns because despite the fact that Hanko actually increases the ceiling of where Atleti's defense can be, Atleti's defense are shaky and it's down to quality. It's true last season Atleti conceded lots of goals from individual errors. You have the likes of Lenglet. Oh, I'm mixing this French name. Laporte, Lenormand, and the rest. So it's actually kind of I don't want to say bizarre, but yeah, with Lenglet, you had a lot of individual mistakes. Same for Jose Maria Jimenez, and Lenormand seemed to be like the best of the bunch. But with Hanko raising the bar, it's like the quality or the standard Hanko is setting. It's like there is no player at Atleti who can actually like meet this standard. And looking at the Espanyol game where we are playing against a team who have a lot of like area play, what do you think is the issue defensively? Because Lenormand struggled a lot when it comes to the area game, and the header was actually from his player which was marking. It's true, it's a brilliant header and maybe he could do nothing about it. So do you think Atleti's defensive woes are just more than the collective, or if the collective gets better and this player gets to know each other, then the individual errors will become like mask or not showing that much?
Well, I think when you have, as I said earlier, two of your new important signings in your back four, that's gonna some of that is going to be linked to just needing to build partnerships and build relationships. I do think Lenormand and Hansko need more games together. I think that I think is right. And I know you're saying about defending crosses and that. Of course, the first goal was a set piece, and the person who loses his marker is not a defender. It's Raspadori. It's the forward who lets Miguel Rubio go. I think the other thing to look at, particularly with the set piece goals conceded, and we spoke about it before recording, is in both goals you gave away, you start the move for Espanyol. One is Llorente dribbling inside, a heavy touch, and he commits a foul. And the second goal is Barrios trying a switch of play, as we talked about earlier, that he probably didn't need to do. I'd have to see it again, but my instinct at the time was he didn't need to do it. It then goes to El Hilali, who's under no pressure, probably because Ruggeri's standing next to another Espanyol player. It might have been Tyrese Dolan, and he doesn't know, do I stay with Dolan? Do I go up and press? And that sort of communication thing between him and Hansko, that will be solved over time. And then the cross comes in, as you said, brilliant header. I don't think Lenormand could have done too much about the Peremie header because Mia's going away from goal, and he's probably thinking, I'm doing a pretty good job here. I'm making it as hard for him as possible, and then the header's unbelievable. So I think it's more a team thing in terms of trying to limit those mistakes before the Espanyol move happens. Because as I said, you gave away a poor free kick, and then you lost possession too easily, which led to the winning goal. So at the moment, I understand your point about being concerned, but I would say, let the new back four and the two in front, let them have a run together and see. And then if mistakes still happen, then look into going, okay, what needs to happen? Does Jimenez need to come in? Does there have to be a change and a restructuring of the midfield? Does Galan have to come in more on the left? I don't know. These are just questions that Cholo and his staff will have to ask themselves. But at the moment, I would say I'm less concerned defensively. But it's something that Cholo and the team will have to look at. But I would also not want to go over the top because I think let's give these guys time to adjust, and also particularly at the back with Hansko and Ruggeri. It's not like Baena and Cardoso, who have played in La Liga and know the league inside out. These guys, they're not just adapting to the city of living in Madrid, which we forget about. I don't know what either their Spanish is like. If they're learning that, then that takes time to learn and adapt. Their La Liga is a different league to the other top leagues. Maybe I think there are similarities probably to the Dutch league and to the Italian league where those guys have come from. So in theory, that should help them adapt. But time is going to be needed. So I wouldn't be panicking, but I would be looking at it closely and then seeing, if you guys keep a run of clean sheets for the next 3 or 4 games, then we can go, okay, that was that game. Those mistakes happen, but we've learned from them. So it's just about, I think, keeping on top of things and just watching this weekend and seeing if Atleti as a whole team, it's not just on the goalkeeper and the back four to defend. It's the responsibility of the whole team to attack and the whole team to defend.
I just feel like the individual qualities are actually like worrying. Like Lenormand, since his head injury, I think his defending has been on the decline, and it's actually understandable given that that actually affects you as a player psychologically because you want to also think of your life after football as well. And I'm not a medical expert, and I don't know how that affects him and his game now, but I believe it affects you even as a human being, given that when you look at most of his duels, he's like trying to avoid contact with the player, and he's kind of like heading is kind of like a little bit unorthodox, where he's like 100% guaranteed to win the ball. So you have those small details which are not actually define a lot at this level. So, like you said, maybe as the team actually gels going forward, a lot of things are actually like iron out. Moving to talk about Espanyol's approach, because I believe, given Atleti's status in La Liga, Atleti will be facing a lot of teams who play in a low block and also do a lot of quick transitions, which obviously indicates, in my opinion, that Johnny Cardozo will be key. So, how do you see Atleti's approach to playing in when Espanyol were in a low block, and how do you see Atleti versus low blocks and also against high pressing teams?
Well, against low blocks, as you've mentioned before about how good how good Almeida and Baena are finding space. That's going to help against low blocks. The patience that we spoke about earlier in terms of not rushing things. Of course, you have to find the balance. You can't just pass the ball around too slowly, because it's easy for the low block to defend if players in whatever shape they're choosing are staying in their positions. But I think the transitions. Of course, they're going to be an issue, because it's going to be the best way if a team defends deep to attack. That's just common. But I think you've certainly got enough energy in midfield to press and win the ball back quickly in the players we've discussed about. You've mentioned that's a strength of Johnny's. I'd say it's definitely a strength of Conor Gallagher's. I think Barrios can do it quite well as well. So, I mean, we need to. And I think there has to be a comparison to when you guys play at the Metropolitano and when you're away from home, because I think in the last couple of years, as I've mentioned before, at home you guys have done pretty well. I don't have the exact stats of what your percentage of winning your home games is compared to some of the other top teams, but I would assume it's going to be quite close to them. And it's just improving, as you said, in the small details. Of course, taking risks on the ball, which of course has to happen, but taking the right risks, making sure players are positioned so that when the transition does happen, I said, knowing when to, because sometimes you do have to give free kicks away, but knowing when to give them away and being smart, especially in La Liga, because you mentioned about the referees. So I think that there's definitely more energy in midfield that's going to help with that. You've got, I think, more quality in attack in terms of using the ball, finding space, playing, the killer passes. As long as you have I said before about the runners and the movement to go with that, you'll break teams down, you'll get chances. I still think there's more quality chances to arrive, because even though you had chances at Espanyol, I didn't think many in open play were great chances. There were more half chances, and Ruggieri would get to the byline and he couldn't quite find the player he'd want on the cutback. And maybe mixing some of the crossing up a little bit can probably help with that. But I think, in theory, with the energy and the younger players you've got in the team, that ability to cope, especially with the transitions, should be easier to deal with. And in terms of high pressing, most of the team will have the legs to do it. They'll have the energy, they'll have the physicality to do it for a larger part of the game than what Cholo and what Atleti teams have before have had the capacity to do it. So that will help them. So I think it's just about, we said before about Cholo having a new season, a new idea, and after 3 or 4 weeks it doesn't quite work. So, as we said before, he maybe reverts to type and goes the other way. And I'm hoping that if it doesn't quite click in these first 3 or 4 games, that he just makes those small changes and he just keeps with the idea of going, we're going to press high, we're going to have more of the ball, we're going to do the things that you guys showed for 60 minutes, but we're going to continually work on them and we're going to do them better. We're not going to rip the whole thing up and start again. We're going to do them better, and we're going to make those little changes that in my opinion, that's what the top teams do. They make the small changes at the right time to then end up getting the better results.
Still from you, and like you said, hopefully the small changes that Cholo actually does, it actually helps, because playing against these teams who play in a low block and trying to be the protagonist like for a large part of the games, as we saw against Espanyol, but not just 60 minutes, but 60 minutes and more, will be viable to counter attacks, and we have tools that we can use to actually hurt them, but they also have as well. Like for example, against Sevilla, who this on match day one, they were actually the team who actually shocked me the most, because I actually know the players they have, but looking at how the players were utilized and the way they played actually gave me a Piazza type of vibe in the aggressiveness, the tempo, and how often they made use of their wingers, and given the weapons they have on the wings, playing against such team can really, really be devastating for you. So yeah, let's see how it goes, but I'm sure you agree with me that in the games against Madrid and Barca, and also in the big Champions League game, Cholo he goes back to his roots.
I hope he doesn't, especially at the Metropolitano. I understand it a little bit away from home, depending on the circumstances in those big games. I understand away from home being a bit more cautious, but I think at home, you've got the talent, you've got the players to be braver, and hopefully we will see that. But until those games arrive, and depending on the 11 he has as well, it is dependent on the players he has available. Will of course dictate those things as well. So, but I agree with you. I think when Atleti play those sides, especially away from home, it will be Cholo going back to his roots. I hope he doesn't, but I agree with you. I think he will.
Well, like you said, we all hope he doesn't, but I think Cholo is Cholo, and he knows best, because despite the fact with our analysis, he has more insight and more knowledge and experience than us. But despite that, I believe they now have quality to enable them to defend higher up, like play 50 meters away from their goal, as previous seasons where Atleti had Aspilicueta and Witzel. So, Kelv, Atleti will be looking to actually get their first win of the season at the Wanda Metropolitano this weekend. And talking about, not Wanda Metropolitano, Atleti will be looking to get their first win this season in La Liga at the Riyadh Air Metropolitano. New investors, new names. I think the season you had Wanda when Atleti had Chinese sponsors, and he had Civitas last season, and then midway through last season. So Atleti, I think we just call Metropolitano. That saves us a lot of stress, I believe.
We're covered there.
Yeah, for sure. And talking about the Metropolitano curve, Atleti will be presenting their new signings today. That's the Thursday we are recording, and it's now maybe become a tradition where last season Atleti actually did that with the male and female team, where you had players like Lauren Real from the female team, you had Laoni, you had Gio, and then you had the likes of Alvarez, Sørloth, Gallagher, and I think they are also doing the same this season with the new signings, the Amada, our new number 11. You have Jack the Ripper. Hopefully he rips a lot of defense this season in La Liga, and they'll be presenting them today, and they will be including the B team, which the name has been changed to Atlético Madrid, which is actually great, given that it's going back into its roots. So, Kelv, what do you think about this tradition of presenting these new players?
I mean, personally, I think it should have been done before the game against Espanyol. I know you guys were away from home, but I think if you're going to do anything like that, it should be done before the season starts, because it must be weird for the fact that, particularly for the players you mentioned, I'm now being presented as a new signing, but I've already played for the club. But it's definitely a tradition. I mean, most clubs in Spain do it when the individual player signs, whereas, as you said, Atleti for the last year did it with all of them kind of in one go, and it's not something you see in England. Normally, you just get the announcement on social media and an interview with the player, and that's it. So. But it's obviously part of the tradition over there, and I do like it. I think it does give the players, probably a more relaxed feel in the stadium for their first time being there as an Atleti player. I know some on that list would have been there as a opposition player, but it's obviously different when you're a home player, and to see, you know, all those fans welcoming you and your new teammates as well. I think it's a good thing, even though it's not something that I've ever I've not seen in England, but I know for a fact it's a very popular tradition in Spain, not just at Atleti, but at other clubs.
Yeah, it's a popular tradition in a lot of clubs. Like if you think of Africa, yeah, I'm thinking of Simba, where you have Simba Day, and they actually that's before the season, and you have the presentation of new signings because Simba actually signed 2 Cameroonians. You have uh, Lonia Ateba and you have Chemalone, and they actually presented them. And in South Africa, it's also popular. So I believe it's like it builds up like fans' excitement and anticipation for the new season, which in my opinion is something that's actually very nice. And Kev, talking about Atleti's first home game, they'll be playing against Elche, and Elche on Matchday one were the only promoted side to actually have a point, and they were one of 2 promoted sides to score a goal. And we saw what Eda Sarabia's team can do. That's what they have been doing in the second division. He's coach Andorra, he's now at Elche. And Betis actually knew that given that Eda Sarabia is like is the former assistant of Kike Setien, who coached Barca and also Betis, and had a great time at Las Palmas. Let's not forget with where the team where you had, I think, the likes of Boateng, and I think that Las Palmas team is that one of the best teams you have watched.
One of the most enjoyable. It was only really for probably 6-7 months in a season, but as you mentioned, they had players like Kevin Prince Boateng, Tanner, Roque Mesa before he moved to England to the Premier League, was kind of orchestrating everything in the base of midfield. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Elche played in a very possession based way, and you could clearly see the link between where Sarabia had been, who he worked with in Setien. And I thought they played very well against Betis. Better in the second half compared to the first. They had a lot of possession in the first half, but couldn't really find any way through in the second half. They pushed even higher up the pitch. They were winning the ball back quicker and earlier, and again didn't create too much. But as you said, they got their goal and they got a point, which is important for them when you're a newly promoted team. Your home form is the most important thing, in my opinion, in trying to stay in the division. So they're definitely going to be a good side and a challenging side for Atleti, but you guys should have enough quality, especially at the Metropolitano, to get your first win of the season.
Well, I agree with you. Atleti has a lot of quality. I'm playing a newly promoted side. I think nothing other than a win, sorry, is expected from Simeone's men. And do you think we will expect the same thing we expect from Kike Setien's team? Because he is not a great fan of Cholo and how Cholo plays football. And when Atleti always play Betis, it's always a cagey game because it's like, sorry, it's like Setien just loves to have the ball for having sake. And as we saw against Betis on Matchday one, Eda Sarabia's team, I think in the first half, they had a lot of the ball, they did not create a lot of chances, but as the game went on, they actually created some chances and they actually grew into the game. But they grew into the game because Betis, like you mentioned before we started recording, talking about the game, Betis will actually take their chances, and you had a lot of counter-attacking opportunities for Betis where with better decision making, then maybe they finish that game 3 or 4 goals, and then maybe we are not talking about Elche being one of the newly promoted sides to have a point. So how do you expect Elche to set up at the Metropolitano? And I'm saying so because last season Eda Sarabi actually surprised me, showed that he can be a manager who is very adaptable to how things set up. And you had games where teams just set up in a mid or low block and then just counter attack and crush them. So how do you think he will set up against Atleti, given that he's coming to the home of the second best home team last season in La Liga?
I think Sarabia will go with a similar idea. to the one that you've spoken about. Maybe a little bit more direct as they build up from the back. They trust the goalkeeper Di Turo a lot. They go back to him. They kind of build with it was like a four, but it's like the goalkeeper, the two centre backs, and it's also the Febas, I think it was, who's kind of like the main kind of defensive midfielder who kind of drops back. Febas, or it might have even been Aguado, can't completely remember. They might have even rotated that kind of dropping role between them. So I think, because for Elche, it's a free hit, as we say sometimes in England. No one is going to expect Elche to go to the Metropolitano and win. No one. Probably not even Elche themselves. So Sarabia might go with a thing of, let's have the ball as much as we can, particularly if you can do that for the first 10, 15 minutes. There may be a situation where the Atleti crowd starts turning, you start hearing whistles, panic might set in, and that would be a fair point to make because we said before, I think there was clearly an element of panic in that last kind of 20-odd minutes of the Espanyol game. So I think the more Elche, even though you said the fact that a lot of Setien's teams had the ball for the sake of having the ball, I don't think Sarabia thinks that way. You said that he's more flexible. I think he is more willing, to, of course, wanting the ball, but also thinking right now, can we attack? Can we find players in space? They have recruited very well up front. They've got Alvaro Rodriguez, who used to be at Real Madrid. They've recently bought Rafa Mir, who's experienced in La Liga, and Andre Silva, who had a very good spell in La Liga. A few people might remember for a few months at Sevilla. So they're definitely striking options for the level that Elche are now that are very good. It's just whether Elche will have the quality on the ball in those areas to supply them. So, and that's what I think the aim will be. It will be to have the ball to maybe not to dominate, but maybe more to control, and maybe to think like, if we've got the ball, if we keep it, if we can frustrate Atleti a little bit, we might be able to find some spaces and have some chances. And as I said, they may be a bit more direct. And we spoke earlier about Atleti. It was tougher to press high against Espanyol because Espanyol were way more direct. I think there'll be a stronger indication of how good Atleti are pressing because I think Elche will play out from the back more. And I think Elche will take risks. They're not afraid to pass to players that are marked. They're not afraid in the midfield to play out to a centre back to then go into a midfielder to then play either forward or just back towards the goalkeeper and to restart the move. So I don't think we're going to see anything dramatically different from Elche. And as I said, there's going to be different questions asked after Atleti in compared to the game against Espanyol, but I think they're questions that Cholo, the Atleti players and the Atleti fans need to see the answers for, and that's hopefully what we'll see on Saturday.
Hopefully, we see a more dynamic Atleti. And when we were talking about the fact that Elche are brave on the ball and they will actually take risks and maybe be more direct than they were versus Betis, it got me thinking about Atleti's hammering of Las Palmas at the Metropolitano, where Las Palmas actually came in with Pimenta and they were very, very brave. And Atleti's high press actually caught them off guard. And I think this will also be a good test for Atleti's high press because the core players of the Elche team are actually those who have been there. They need to actually add some quality in attack. And they have brought in the likes of Andres Silva, and we are going to see. But I believe if they actually take the risks of player from the back, I believe Cholo will come up with a strategy to actually catch them. But then, what would be your score position of the game? Or a tactical something that will happen within the game?
Well, I totally agree with your point in terms of the pressing. As I said myself, I think there's going to be a more clear indication of where Atleti are with that in this game than there was ever going to be in the Espanyol game. I think you guys will win. I think you guys will keep a clean sheet as well because I can't see Elche creating too much. I know they were better creating in the second half, but most of it was shots from distance. There was only really maybe one or two chances in the box, and one of them led to a goal from Valera, who looked quite good, and Elche looked like they might be able to do something in the wide areas, but still need to see a little bit more of that. So, but in terms of a prediction, let's say Atleti 3, Elche 0.
Wow, well, a first clean sheet for Jano Black and maybe Aleti firing on all cylinders. And I think, excuse me, Aleti will actually be firing at all cylinders because like the pressure coming to in this game and maybe Elche use that in their favor. But I think if Aleti get the first goal, then this might be a very, very like big defeat for Elche. But then again, it's all about the 3 points. So, Kerv, with that aside, coming to like big questions. Like after what we saw against Espanyol, the big questions going on into the season. Excuse me. Can Simeone build a consistent attacking formula with the rotations he plans on doing? That's the regular substitutions.
He can, but it will take longer. It will take longer to do because if you're changing things and if players know they've only got maybe 60 minutes or the subs know they've only got half an hour. But I think it'll just be a case of, as I said before, look at the opposition you're playing. But I think more importantly, particularly in modern football with the amount of games there are, just look at the players you've got and see, are they fit? Are they ready to give you the high intensity levels that you're going to demand from them right from the start? Or do you look at whoever it is and go, no, you're a little bit tired, a little bit leggy, maybe not sharp mentally. Okay, I'll put you on the bench and I'll put you on. So we're already into Matchday 2, and Alex Baena's already got an injury, and as you said before, is missing for 2 weeks. So it's about finding the balance, and it's about trying to work out as best you can when to rotate and who to rotate against. It's not an easy thing to do, but if he can find that balance, not just in attack but in all the areas of the team, then with the squad you've got, you should be able to cope with the vast majority of that rotation. No team, I think, can cope with all of it, but if you can cope with it as best you can, then that leads you to hopefully having a very good season.
Okay, Kev, that's actually like well answered because if I was asked that, I don't actually know. And on the last pod you talked about Griezmann being a super sub, and I think his decline is actually what we saw towards the end of last season and what we saw last game. And I think I'm fully on board with him having the career role this season. And Kelv, the next question, the defeat against Espanyol, is it a one-off misstep or it's an early warning sign for Aleti?
We don't know. Because when something happens on the first weekend of the season, you don't know really. It's probably a little bit of both. Because Espanyol have a very, they do what they do and they do it very, very well. There probably is early warning signs in terms of Sørloth thinking, about those substitutions that we discussed about and how everything fell apart, especially when Baena and Almeida came off. And it seemed like that there was a clear plan, and then all of a sudden, within about a few seconds, there wasn't. So that's something that is bigger. But you've also then got, losing at Espanyol can happen. As I mentioned earlier, I think you drew there last year. Sorry, not lost year. I think you drew 1-1. I can't remember if you drew or lost. But Real Madrid went there and lost. Other top teams and the other higher teams in La Liga struggled and maybe didn't. Not many won at Espanyol last year. I can only think of Barca winning there and maybe Rayo. That might have been it. Possibly, maybe Sevilla as well. So, not many teams go to Espanyol and win. But the easy answer is Is it a one-off or is it a bigger problem? That's a question we'll probably know the answer to maybe during or even after the international break.
Yeah, for sure. And before the international break, Atleti would have played 3 games, and that would have given us what to expect from Atleti this season. And like you said, playing away from Espanyol, like we talked on the first episode of the season, where we previewed the Espanyol game, we'd actually said that it wouldn't be an easy game, and we talked about their home form, where about 80% of their points last season came from there, and that was a major reason why they stayed up in La Liga. So it was not really an excuse me, easy game, but they actually had a good start to the season by beating one of the contenders for La Liga. So, Kelv, we have come to the end of this episode, and it was fantastic talking with you, and I hope the listeners enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed listening to you and also enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, same here. Always enjoy speaking to you, listening to you, and speaking about Atleti.
Yeah, Kev, it's a pleasure. And if you've listened up bad, we just say thank you, and remember, nunca deja de creer. Never stop believing, and see you next time.